So why do you think that you got into hot water with all of this?
Well, I think if you take the puzzle pieces, and I'm not a conspiracy-oriented person, but I think as you put together the jigsaw puzzle, in May of 2014, I made the quiet decision to recuse myself from a non-judicial duty. It's not my job as a judge to solemnize marriage. I chose to. So the day after Judge McShane in the federal court decided that the Oregon Constitution violated the U.S. Constitution, and even though the people of Oregon had voted in 1996 to label marriage between a man and a woman, Judge McShane decided that that violated the Constitution. So I had a choice to make. And I chose not to marry people anymore. Now, I still had marriages on my calendar, so I was going to finish those out, and I did. And that was, frankly, I think that made some people mad in my building, including my presiding judge, Jamise Rhodes. And when she asked me questions about this gun incident, well, she accused me, in my opinion, of giving a gun, and you knew your son went shooting with him, and I said, I did not. I don't even know that happened. I went home that evening on August 21st, 2014, and called my son and said, did you go shooting with Sheehan? And he said, yeah, Dad, what's the matter? He said, Justin, he's a felon. You can't go shooting with a felon. When did that happen? I don't know, back in January. So as soon as that came up and I self-reported to the commission, I wrote the letter on the 23rd and said, there's an incident. You might want to look. I don't think it's an ethical violation. The letter's in evidence. You've probably seen it. I've been told that when the commission came down to look at that one incident, that some people in the courthouse came to the commission and said, by the way, did you know he doesn't marry same-sex couples? And that's when everything blew up. So you put the pieces together, Amy.
Sounds like you think it's retaliation.
Well, I get along with most everybody. I enjoyed my colleagues. I was a very good judge, at least that's what the community told me. I don't want to say it was retaliation because I don't know their hearts. That's not my job to judge them. I just put two and two together from what the facts are, and I think people decided that because gay marriage was quote unquote the law, that I ought to at least celebrate, stay neutral, whatever they wanted to, and I did. But that wasn't enough for some people. They wanted me to come out like they challenged some of my other judges and say, well, you're a Catholic, you're not going to marry same-sex couples. And yet my colleagues who were said, well, I've changed my mind, I think I will, and chose to celebrate it. Okay, that's their liberty of conscience. They should have that. And the government shouldn't tell somebody what to do. But why am I different? Don't I have, as a judge, liberty of conscience to quietly exercise my liberty and say I choose not to marry, even though I care for everybody in society?
So the charge was that you were aiding and abetting a felon in possession of a firearm. You're saying that you weren't aiding him in possessing the firearm.
How could I? I didn't even, it wasn't my gun. I didn't know it was there. And if the possession occurs when somebody picks up the gun, so the district attorney says. So he had already had the gun in his hands. How could I aid and abet when he already has it in his hands? Does the law require me as a judge in that situation to say, hey, Sheehan, put on the gun? I don't think it does, and probably I should have done that. But I didn't even remember that he was a felon. I wasn't there with my judge robes on. I wasn't there with my judge hat. I was there trying to help a veteran. The night before Christmas, we had a judge who took him to his home for dinner. We planned that so that Mr. Sheehan would be bookended at Christmas time and socialized. The prosecutor met with him, took him on bike rides. That's how, the prosecutor. That's how unique this court was. So To pull that instance out of the treatment court and somehow show it to the public like this judge has gone off the rails. He's meeting with people at their homes. Oh my God. Well, of course we did. This man needed help, and we gave him help. And he never should have been abused by the state of Oregon in trying to get to me. It's just wrong.
A lot of people have said you've done things wrong. They have a list of things they say you've done wrong. Do you think you've done anything wrong?
Well, I think in a society where truth is relative, which is an unfortunate standard nowadays, I'm not a person who thinks truth is relative. I think that, the number 2 is the number 2. It's not a relative scale. I don't get to call the number 2 0 or the number 10. It's the number 2. And so when people say that I've done something wrong, I want to ask them, well, help me understand. Tell me what I've done wrong. I went to a veteran's home in the dead of winter to help him because his only source of heat was broken. If that's wrong in that person's eyes, okay. I'm not going to try to convince them otherwise. People say, well, as a judge, you shouldn't go to a probationer's home. God forbid you're a judge. Well, they forget the context. This is a veterans treatment court. The emphasis is upon treatment. It's unlike any other court in the system for the most part. It's a collaborative court, which means all the participants, meaning the district attorney, the defense attorney, the probation officer, the sheriff's office, veterans administration officials, treatment officials, we all work together so that we can surround each individual veteran and create a plan for that veteran so we can get them back into society. In that context, the studies show that the more time a judicial official spends with that veteran, the better that veteran becomes. During my tenure, the recidivism rate was 0. That's unbelievable. And I believe it's because that team was excellent for the most part. And with Mr. Sheehan, he did noble service for this country. There's no doubt about it. He was a hero. Navy SEAL, but he came back pretty bruised and broken. And I don't want to get into his medical history. It's really irrelevant for what has happened now. But I look at him as the victim of the state of Oregon.
Do you feel like he, in his heart, didn't want to testify against you then? I mean, in his heart, he didn't think that you did something illegal?
Well, I didn't do anything illegal. If you ask the average citizen on the street, what's the purpose of the law that says felons shouldn't possess a weapon? And the average citizen would say, well, because they've lost the right to possess, own, use a firearm. And we don't want to put a weapon that could hurt somebody in a person who's a felon's hands. That's the purpose of it, to protect society against people who've done bad things, serious crimes. Is it really the purpose of the statute when a Navy SEAL who's used to weapons picks up an unloaded gun? Understand, there's no bullets in this gun. And he shows a young man who happened to be standing next to him who owned that gun, my son, here's how you shoot a guy in the face around the corner. Because that's what I heard as I was fixing that pellet stove. I didn't know Justin had the gun with him. I didn't know he had it in his truck. I didn't know he brought it in. We're a gun family. I have a concealed weapons permit. I hope it's okay to carry guns in this building because I carry a gun most of the time. So guns aren't any big deal to us. I turned, I looked, and I saw Mr. Sheehan holding a gun sideways like he was around a corner. And I heard him say, you bash him in the face and then you shoot him. And I thought, ooh, that's nasty. And I went back to, my hands were in the soot, and I was fixing his pellet stove. Is that illegal? Is that what the purpose of the statute is? To then charge me with a felony because I happen to be in the room? There's something wrong when government officials can weaponize political differences. That is not the way our government should function. I was given an opportunity by the commission. Basically, I don't know the exact quote, but the paraphrase is, this is all private now. if you just resign, it'll all go away. And I looked at him and said, I told the people, my attorneys, I can't do that. I didn't do anything wrong. How can I resign just to avoid trouble? That doesn't seem to me to be part of who I am or who we should be as Oregonians. And so I chose not to resign to make it all go away. And that was a conscious choice. I didn't want to fight. I figured that perhaps I'd get justice if they just listened to the evidence. My attorneys warned me, and they said, the people on that commission are not going to listen to this evidence. And you're going to get railroaded. And I guess I was a little naive.
Did you feel railroaded?
Oh, yeah.
By the commission?
Oh, no doubt. They said we get 5 days, 6 days to present our case. We got 3. We couldn't present half the witnesses we had. They charged me with something that happened 3 years before that they'd already dropped, this soccer thing. How do you get to witnesses, Amy? Excuse me, Amy. How do you get to witnesses that were college students on a field 3 years before? That's why we have statute of limitations, because you can't go dig up witnesses that have disappeared. You never knew who they were. It was a kabuki theater, if you know what I mean.
The commission hearing.
Mm-hmm. Read the evidence.
Yesterday was a big day, the dismissal. How do you feel about it?
I think it came as a big surprise. I mean, it really shocked us in part. It was a big relief. I mean, when you go through what's now been over 4 years of some sort of investigation and 2.5 years of a Department of Justice investigation and then getting charged for something that never happened, yeah, there was a big sense of relief.
So, how do you feel right now? Do you feel vindicated? Do you feel like you've been heard? How are you going forward and processing this all? What's happened over the past couple years?
Well, for 4 years, I've had attorneys tell me, you have to be extremely careful with what you say because they will use a lot of these things against you at some point in time, and they've tried. And so I think I've been, I hope, respectful to the system, my peers, my colleagues, but yet also hopefully trying to be a little bit of a voice for liberty of conscience in the sense that our liberties do matter and they should not be subject to other people who tell us what we should think or do if those people are part of the government. So I think I've been relatively quiet, probably as best I can be. So I feel liberty at the sense that I can finally sit down. And I think, I'm not going to point fingers. I'm saddened by the state of the media in part. I know that most reporters and editors, they have to dance to, the tyranny of the urgent. The media cycle is so quick that they really don't have time to look at stuff. So they, instead of investigating, sometimes they end up regurgitating. And that's not, in my case, how many times does this supposed Hitler picture have to come up when the commission didn't even rule on that because it was such a bogus charge? And yet every time the story comes up, oh yeah, this is the judge who put the Hitler picture. Really? Did I do that? Look at the picture. So yeah, it's been frustrating that there's this narrative that got created, that there's this homophobic, angry, conservative, religious nut on the Marion County Circuit Court. And if they just talk to the people who know me, my colleagues, even my gay and lesbian colleagues, who know how I act and how I lived my life, they would see a very different picture than this one-dimensional, target that somehow has been placed on the wall and had darts thrown at it.
So you feel like you've been silenced, squelched, disappointed in the media, frustrated that you've been misunderstood.
Well, yeah, I'm not a victim. I refuse to take that role. I made choices. I've told the commission that if they think that I, as a judge, that I didn't use good judgment by trying to help somebody, I'll wear that. But at the same time, if my team, in trying to surround Mr. Sheehan, helped him and prevented him from self-harming, yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to go through the 4 years again. But if someday that comes out that saved his life, then it's all worth it. He was a valuable human being. And he never should have been treated this way by the state of Oregon. Never.